Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for turning up. My name's Paul Maxwell. I'm from Healthy Waterways and Catchments, which is basically an amalgamation between Healthy Waterways, which you may have known of, and also SEQ Catchments. We've come together as one organisation. My background, I'm a marine scientist. I've done a lot of work in Moreton Bay on seagrass and water quality, a little bit on coral reefs and mangroves as well, and we're starting to get into more an understanding of fish communities and how they use the different habitats. So I have a very vast interest and love of Moreton Bay. I spend a lot of time out here, and I spend as much time as possible out here, if I can say that. So yeah, more than happy to answer any questions you have at all. So I just wanted to briefly put everything in context. So as we've said, we've been looking at waterways and in healthy waterways for about 16, 17 years. We came together, or we were formed as a partnership, largely as a result of the community, local government, state government and the federal government being quite concerned that the state of Moreton Bay was deteriorating, and there was a lot more problems that were occurring because of the pressures that were happening in the catchments, and they couldn't fix it. No individual organisation could fix it. The state couldn't fix it without the local councils. Local councils couldn't do anything by themselves without joining forces. They needed to have a partnership, and that's how Healthy Waterways and Partnerships was formed. So essentially we're looking at areas up here. So as a result of the legacy clearing up areas sort of the back of Wyvenhoe Dam, here is the Somerset Dam, up in the upper Brisbane, the Lockyer Valley, Bremer, down here in the Logan. All these areas have been cleared historically for grazing. So you get a lot of these trees that have been removed, and that starts the erosion processes. This dirt starts to get mobilised up in the catchment areas, ends up in places like the Brisbane River, but also the other estuaries, Tingalpa Creek, Park Creek, these sorts of places. This is the Brisbane River after a decent rainfall in February of 2001. At the time I was a very young tech who drove a boat, essentially looking at turbidity in the Brisbane River and water quality. And you can see, just after a 20 mil rainfall event, how much turbidity or how much sediment is in the river. So it's brown, it's chocolate brown. That stuff, all that sediment ends up on the edge of the river. So this gentleman here is a very good friend of mine. He leapt over the front of the boat that particular day, Gleeful landed, and sunk up to his waist in mud. And the entire upper part of the Brisbane River, or the majority of the upper part, the banks look like that. Big, thick, deep mud. As far as I know, he's still there. We haven't seen him since. We haven't been able to pick him out. As a result of all of that mud, that sits there until we get a flood. So we know that it's all sitting there, it's all well and good, until we get a flood like 2011. So this is a photo taken from a plane about there, looking towards Tangalooma. So you can see the sand hills over here at Tangalooma. So that floodplain went out the mouth of the Brisbane River and covered the western and northern part of Moreton Bay in a thick, thick chocolate brown colour for about a month. And we'll talk about the patterns in Moreton Bay in a second, which are very important to help explain algal blooms and jellyfish blooms. Excuse me. The other main problem we had in the early 2000s was sewage treatment plants. So this is the Luggage Point sewage treatment plant. It's the largest sewage treatment plant in Queensland. Most of Brisbane's sewage goes to that particular point. And 160 megalitres a day approximately gets spat out the mouth. It changes, it's a little bit lower, a little bit higher depending upon the rainfall. That was upgraded to a significant proportion in the early 2000s, late 1999, early 2000s. It's one of the best quality sewage treatment plants in Queensland, but it still discharges at the mouth of the river there. Before it was upgraded, it caused a lot of algal blooms. So this green water here is in the Cabbage Tree Creek, which also has a sewage treatment plant in it, a little bit like Tingalpa Creek. You see Tingalpa Creek when you cross it, it's quite green. That's essentially phytoplankton blooming in the water column. In the estuaries, that's quite normal. It's what happens in the middle of summer. When you get a lot more nutrients coming off the catchment areas, they start to bloom. When you do have point sources of nutrients, like from sewage treatment plants, they bloom more often, so you get this bright green colour. This is what happened in the early 2000s, and as a result, led to these fish kills. Fish kills are usually as a result of oxygen being sucked out of the water column. So fish need oxygen to breathe like we do, obviously. When you get phytoplankton bloom, they produce a lot of oxygen. Fish love it. When they die off, all the bacteria that eat the algae start to consume oxygen as well. So then all of a sudden you get these huge fish kills, which are quite common. So for the rest of the talk, I'm going to be talking a lot about algae, and you have to understand the currents of Moreton Bay to help explain the spatial patterns of Lyngbya blooms and jellyfish blooms in Moreton Bay. So you guys, we're currently sitting just down here, Coochiemudlo Island. You guys probably know more about the currents and the wind and the weather patterns than anyone else down here. If you have anything to add to what I'm about to say, jump on in, more than happy to do that. Generally with Moreton Bay, we've got two sides of the bay. We've got the western side of the bay over here and the eastern side of the bay, obviously. Those two things are quite different. Water quality in this part of the bay is typically fairly poor, or much worse than the water quality in this part of the bay. That's largely as a result of two things. The first one being all the estuaries, so the Brisbane River here, Pine River here, Coochiemudlo River here, they all discharge into the western side of the bay, so they're typically poorer water quality. The other reason is because of the current patterns. So you've got the North Passage up here, South Passage here, and then Coochiemudlo, which is the major ocean outfalls. And what happens tends to be that the currents come down the western side of Moreton, go past Keogh Island here, do a big U-shape, and start coming up to the north. So everything that gets discharged out of the mouths of the rivers heads to the north of the river. So if you remember the photo that I showed before of the flood, all of the stuff that came out of the mouth of the Brisbane River in the flood in 2011 went out there. Very little of it got down through Waterloo Bay and out into the eastern side of the bay. A little bit did, but nowhere near to the extent that it did up here in Deception Bay and Bramble Bay. So that's the patterns. The other pattern that's really important to know is the wind pattern. So we're getting a strong, northeasterly today. So that's typical of the winds this time of year. So you get this very strong onshore wind, typically in summer. You also get those southeasterly trade winds. So that really pushes up everything into these embayments like Bramble Bay here, Waterloo Bay here, and Deception Bay. So you typically get everything like Lyngbya blooms and jellyfish blooms end up in these areas at the end of the wind. You guys are at the end of the northeasterly, so you obviously on your beaches you get a lot of algae, and presumably you get lots of jellyfish sitting up on these beaches up here as well. So that's probably half the reason why you're seeing so much of it. So that's pretty important to know. Habitats at Moreton Bay, I think the reason why we're interested in this sort of stuff is largely because these habitats in Moreton Bay are critical for the values of the area. So in the brown here, this is all mangroves, or in the green you get seagrasses, and then you also got corals. So you guys have got corals just off the yellow, up to the yellow cross just up here, and a pretty good coral reef running out towards the red marker to the east. We've just spent a fair bit of time mapping that area for seagrass as well. It's not great barrier reef quality, but it's actually, considering the proximity to a major city, the fact that there's corals, live corals sitting offshore here is pretty cool, and a lot of people don't know that from Brisbane. So we're trying very hard to get that information out, and over the weekend there'll actually be a press release about a new coral map that we've been involved in through Reef Check, which is a volunteer organisation, uses the community to map coral reefs and check the health of coral reefs out in all of the world, essentially. So these areas are really critical to keep water quality good, and also to make sure that algae doesn't bloom. Lyngbya blooms on the seagrass meadows, and a lot of the areas like this big meadow up here in northern Deception Bay and this whole area here is where the Lyngbya blooms occur, and that puts at threat all of the seagrasses in those areas, which are critical for things like turtles and dugongs, also the fish species that we hold here, the commercial fish species that we have, bream, flathead, whiting, they all use seagrass at some point in their life cycle, so they're quite a critical habitat. Unfortunately, they have been lost over the past 20 odd years. These pink areas are the areas in which we've lost them. A significant loss of seagrass up here in Deception Bay, but also just to the north over here, Point Halloran and to the north of Point Halloran up towards Toondah Harbour, you've got all the deep seagrasses, which do come and go, they're quite seasonal. They have been lost since 1987 when we did our first survey in 1987, that was before my time of working here. So there has been significant loss of seagrass, which is another reason why we're trying to preserve what we've got left in a lot of ways, and algae blooms are really causing a big problem. This is Lyngbya Majuscula, so this is the toxic cyanobacteria which you've been seeing. It does like to grow on seagrass meadows, but it can also establish on coral reefs. Lyngbya is a natural cyanobacteria. You can find it all the way up the coast. Throughout all of the Great Barrier Reef, there are different Lyngbya species. The one we have here is a toxic species, and you were saying before you've been impacted by it. Is that right? So I'll show you a few photos. We'll get to that point in a sec. But it has got a toxin in it which can affect the fish that eat seagrass and the turtles that eat seagrass. After it grows, it tends to produce a gas which then lifts the algae off the seagrass and produces these huge mats, which you can see on the right hand side here. It's those mats which then end up getting washed in by the tide and by the wind and end up on the beaches around the place. So particularly up on Deception Bay at the end of a strong southeasterly, they get huge 6-foot mats of Lyngbya, which they spend a lot of money on removing. I'll show you a photo in just a sec as well. Lyngbya blooms in Moreton Bay have been quite common, so they have been occurring for a very long time. A lot of the fishermen talk about Lyngbya blooms as far back as the 1940s and quite regularly, but since we've been looking, they have been increasing in extent and severity, so over the past 17 or 18 years, and we'll get to some of the causes of the Lyngbya blooms in just a sec as well. But I wanted to put this in here. So this is actually a photocopy or a scan of a slide. So, you know, back in the day when we didn't have digital cameras, this is the first shot that James Udy had taken over at Peel Island. So this is just a Lyngbya growing out of the intertidal banks over at Peel Island in Horseshoe Bay. And it's always there throughout the year. It's very small, it doesn't seem to bloom that much, it just sits in little patches in that intertidal zone. This table here, in early 2004, 2005, the federal government said we've had enough. We want to do something about this Lyngbya bloom, and this comes to your point, Vivian, about what's happening now. There was a huge furor about Lyngbya. All the councils got together and said, look, we need to do something about it. The federal government said how harmful algal blooms are our priority, we will stamp them out, we'll do everything we can to eliminate them. We got together and said, when do they occur, what are the patterns, what can we see? Where you see a green blotch is essentially when a bloom, the month that a bloom has been reported. So you can see generally, blooms tend to occur between October and February, March. But in some years, like 1988, 1999, which is when that photo was taken, they bloomed in June and went all the way through to December. This year, if this year was on this particular graph or particular table, that would have occurred every single month of 2016. I say this year, I meant 2016. So they tend to happen in summer, and there's a few reasons for that which we'll get to in a second. When we started this workshop, the old FCQ catchments guy, Shannon Mooney, if you know that name, he's a GIS expert, he put together all the reports of a bloom in this heat map. Essentially, the reports of a bloom all put together, and you can sort of tell where the majority of the blooms occur. You can see that the majority of the blooms in Moreton Bay are up here on Deception Bay, all through Stone Passage. The eastern banks, where all these seagrass meadows are, the southern part of Peel, a little bit around Fisherman Islands, and then down around Pelican Banks. You typically, when this was data up to about 2012, typically don't get too many Lyngbya blooms in and around Coochie, but you get affected by the Lyngbya that's coming from other places. So the banks are just over here, Pelican Banks are just over here, they're not too far away. Horseshoe Bay is not very far away either, so as soon as you get that lifting phase and it gets onto the water column, it gets blown by the northeasterly wind and ends up down here. You also get blooms down off Garden Island. There's some great seagrass meadows down off Garden Island to the south of us here. They tend to also get blown up by the southeasterly, so you guys are in a little hotspot with all the beaches of where it gets washed in. Just very briefly, I wanted to sort of show how this works. We've done a lot of work on Lyngbya blooms in this particular area here. And these are nutrients, essentially, before the bloom and after the bloom. And our understanding of Lyngbya blooms was that they were driven by nutrients. We know a lot more since this project. We went into this project thinking that they were only driven by nutrients, and most of those nutrients were sourced from the catchment areas. And we know that not to be true 100%, and I'll get into the details in just a sec. So it's got four main phases. The initiation phase, and it happens to be that it initiates in the same place every single time. Then it starts to grow out, and you can't really notice it at this point. It starts to grow off. And then all of a sudden, exponential phase, which is the third phase, starts to really grow high, and that's when you start to get the thick stuff sitting on the seagrass meadows. You start to see it, and then it starts to decay. That's the fourth phase, and that's when it hits the surface of the water and starts to distribute across the bay, essentially. So it's a very distinct phases in a bloom cycle. This year, those four phases weren't so distinct. They weren't categorically growth of initiation, expansion, growth, and then decay. They all kind of mixed up. Different areas started at different times. So something very unusual happened last year, and I'm pretty sure it's the weather, but we'll get into that as well. So the impacts of Lyngbya, clearly there's an environmental impact. We talk about seagrass. Seagrass needs light to grow, like every plant. Cyanobacteria needs light, but not as much light to grow. So when you get some kind of light in a seagrass meadow, the Lyngbya can outcompete the seagrass. Now we know how important seagrass is, we talked about that before. As soon as you do that, seagrass begins to suffer, so it begins to start to die. So Lyngbya has a significant environmental impact. It also can affect fish. So we know that fish tend not to like to inhabit Lyngbya beds when they're on the seagrass meadows. A lot of the work that Greg Savage, who's a fisherman from Deception Bay, what he's told us is that he notices that the whiting don't move up into the seagrass meadows in the times where the Lyngbya is blooming on those meadows. He can't catch them. So they tend not to use those areas at all. They tend to stay away. The other thing, of course, is the social and economic impact, where you get, this is a photo from Deception Bay. Moreton Bay Regional Council spent $725,000 over 4 summers in the early 2000s alone, cleaning up the Lyngbya off the beach. Another photo from up near Beachmere. If you're spending your summer at Beachmere on holiday, or up at the Palmerstone Passage on holiday, it tends not to be very nice walking around dead Lyngbya wrack on the beach. So there's a significant social and economic impact, and of course the health impact. So it's a toxic cyanobacteria. It has a toxin in it. It doesn't affect everybody. It seems to accumulate when it starts to die off. So in the growth phase it's not as bad, generally. When it starts to die off is when the toxin starts to release. So when you get these big racks of Lyngbya, is usually when the toxin is the worst. So my advice is not to touch it. I'm pretty sure this is a green turtle. It could be a loggerhead, but it's very difficult to tell the difference with the camera. But these turtles, they need seagrass to live. If there's lots of seagrass, lots of Lyngbya sitting on that seagrass, they eat the Lyngbya by accident, essentially. We're pretty sure they don't target it, but they do pick it up in turn and just try to feed it. Dugongs as well. What happens to these guys is they tend to also get a lesion or a growth on their heads and on their shells. It's called fibropapilloma. In the early 2000s, a big study by Cole Limpus looked at the extent of fibropapilloma around the bay, and the majority of turtles on the Pelican Banks had fibropapilloma. A lot more of them have had it just here than anywhere else in the bay, and that was coinciding with a significant Lyngbya blooms in the area. Now we never showed causality with that, but it's a strong suggestion that that does cause certain problems with the turtle population. So there is a significant impact of the Lyngbya blooms, not only in the seagrass and mangroves and the fish communities, but also these things that like to eat seagrass like green turtles and also dugongs as well. When we started that project, we knew that there were certain reasons for it to bloom. So this is the 4 stages we talked about. So this is the initiation phase, the expansion phase, exponential growth, and then decay phase. And we knew that the light was important and the temperature was important of the water, and we knew that these different nutrients were also important. So we know that algae generally, I said before that those sewage treatment plants cause algae blooms. Do you remember that at the start? A lot of what comes out of sewage treatment plants is nitrogen. This sort of algae, which is not an algae, it's a bacteria, but this Lyngbya doesn't need nitrogen to grow. It can fix its own nitrogen from the air, so it doesn't react so much to things like sewage treatment plants. It needs other types of nutrients, one of them being iron and the other one being phosphorus and dissolved organic carbon. So those sorts of things are where we started to look. And we started to look at your obvious stuff. Okay, up in Palmerstone Passage there's lots of pineapple farming and all sorts of different horticultural strawberries and chickens, all sorts of stuff. Surely that must be where it's coming from. After that whole project though, we realised it's a hell of a lot more complicated than we first thought, which is usually the way ecology works. There was a groundwater suggestion. We did a lot of groundwater work, and we found that there was a significant amount of these nutrients existing in the groundwater. So there's really diverse groundwater infiltrations in Moreton Bay. We have 2 main types. One of them is a surface water groundwater. So you know Brown Lake over at Stradbroke Island? That's typically called a perch lake essentially. It's just the local groundwater under the island. Blue Lake, which is a little bit further west than Brown Lake, actually comes from a lot deeper source of groundwater. And some of the suggestion is that the rainfall that sits off the Great Dividing Range seeps underneath the bay and then comes out at places like Blue Lake and then all of the lakes down further. So there's 2 main types of groundwater, a short-term one and a long-term one. these are very different amounts of nutrients that come out of there. So this is a significant source of nutrients. We also know that the wind and the tide has a significant impact on it as well. So when I said before that it tended to bloom in October and November, that's largely because the light was getting strong coming into spring and summer. The wind tends to drop out. You get a couple of weeks in those two periods where the wind's quite light. Lyngbya doesn't like wind in its initiation phase, and the tide needs to be low. So if you think about a big open flat like we've got out here, a big intertidal flat, in low tide in the middle of the day, you get maximum light, minimal amount of water, and maximise the temperature. So it really starts to heat up. That only occurs for about 2 weeks of the month. So you start to get these phases where you get the low tide in the middle of the day. That's when the temperature starts to increase and Lyngbya starts to bloom. In that 2-week period, if we had lots of cloud cover, Lyngbya won't bloom. So it depends upon that particular point. The fisherman who does a lot of work, Greg Savage, up in that particular area, he could pretty much predict the day that the Lyngbya would start to bloom on Deception Banks. So on the Goblin Beach Banks, sorry. He was pretty good with it. We used to take bets in the office about how close he would get on the date that he would pick. He could also pick it from what he was catching. The sand crabs wouldn't move up into the seagrass meadows, the whiting wouldn't move up into the seagrass meadows, and he'd be able to pick that by the catches about a month out. So it was quite amazing. So a lot more complicated. I'm not going to go through this, you'll be happy to know in detail. But essentially, after this point, after we figured out all the possibilities of the reasons why Lyngbya was blooming, we started to put it together into a model. Essentially, at the bottom end of this model, it says what is the potential or the probability of a bloom. In order to be able to figure that out, you've got to know all of these other things. You've got to know about the number of dry days, the amount of rain, the air temperature, the land runoff load. What else? Light quality, light quantity. Available nitrogen nutrients in the soil. There's a whole bunch of stuff you've got to understand before you can predict a bloom. So basically what I'm saying here is that there's a whole bunch of things that we need to know before we can predict a bloom, and we don't really know why each bloom occurs. What's the main driver of it? And we certainly don't know why it's been so long this year, but it's almost guaranteed that the light quantity and quantity has been amazing. And the temperature has been quite high for the majority of the year, well and truly over and above the averages, particularly in the summer last year. So if you remember, summer last year didn't rain. It didn't rain until about May or June. We had a crazy amount of summer, and that's when the Lyngbya started to really kick on. So light's a critical one. Temperature has been quite high. The water temp has been quite high throughout the year as well. So that would probably prolong the initial bloom at the end of summer last year, and coming into this year, the temperature's been quite high in the start of summer as well. So that's probably the reason why it's been so long. There's not a lot of money around for research. A lot of that was spent in the mid-2000s. We haven't got many researchers working on it. It's not a sexy topic anymore. So very little is being done. We are monitoring it every year, so we do measure the extent of the blooms and where they occur. But as I say, the councils are not that keen on putting a lot of money into it. If we had a lot more money, then we would start. I would personally start targeting these sorts of things to get good values, look at cause and effect. Because what happens down here in terms of a Lyngbya bloom is very different to what happens at Deception Bay. The majority of what we know about Lyngbya blooms in Moreton Bay comes from Deception Bay. They typically bloom in the middle of summer, in October up to about the middle of summer, and then they die off. On the eastern banks, you get blooms in the middle of winter. So clearly it's not the same process as driving it, and there's absolutely no way that it's catchment inflows out in the blooms out in the eastern banks. Something else is going on. So the groundwater is important over there, the light climate's really important over there, something else is going on. We don't understand the differences between blooms. Following the flood in 2011, one of the things that I noticed when I was moving around looking at algae and seagrass was that algae blooms weren't behaving the way they normally behaved in the years following the flood. Sargassum, which you can see, I was watching floating up to the ferry terminal, which is, I'll show you a photo in a sec, likes to grow off reefs. It's blooming in the middle of summer. It never used to do that. Throughout the 2000s, we always used to see it in the middle of winter. And it usually typified cool weather and clear water. And now it's, blooming crazily in the middle. So something else is going on. The whole system's been turned on its head. So these sorts of things, understanding how these sorts of things the causes affect the effect at the end, the bloom, the chance of a bloom. We've got to understand that a lot better.